Financial services. Well, so most people that you see here before you have already introduced themselves, basically.
With the exception of Rutger.
Don't know anybody there. Okay. So we are just all going to stare intently at Rutger while he awkwardly introduces himself.
Yeah. Well, I work at Rockstart and we invest in early stage startups. So that's a short version. The longer version is that the history of building in digital businesses and products for the past 10 years. Started my career at W3C at Boston. My boss was Tim Berners-Lee, so I have an idea what the fundamentals of internet and the dynamic there was like. That was great. And now at Rockstart, so we invest. So every year we invest in 10 of the most promising startups. We do that. Actually, I do 10, and my two other colleagues also both do 10. And they do energy, health, and I do web and mobile, which is like the most broadest category. Actually, we have two fintech companies in the batch right now.
Okay.
And that's about it. So it says here we love startups. So really believe that startups are like a great engine of the economy.
Okay, so the panel is called Innovation in Financial Services in a Dutch Overview. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, but this is of course audience participation time. So if anybody has any questions to any of these people, feel free to ask. Of course, you've already been able to ask them stuff after their own presentations and maybe in the breaks, but let's try to get a little bit of discussion going as well. If I can start with you then, Rutger, if you say we love startups, what specifically do you think about the fintech startup scene in the Netherlands?
Well, I don't know if so I don't look at it as a fintech scene like bound by the geographical borders of the Netherlands. So I tend to look at it a bit broader. Mm-hmm. I think there are really great things going on because we all like. So when you look at like innovation, so your story. When you looked at innovations from the big incumbent companies, of course using all the modern technology way faster than like 10 years ago. So I'm lucky that you guys have all these labs. So I see all these labs popping up at the big corporations, which I think is great. My personal view is a bit more that that there is like a classic innovation dilemma for the big companies. Because they can't disrupt, there's like a risk in disrupting their own business model, and that holds you back. So that's why I like the startups that can create more revolution. They can start with like a blank piece of paper and start from that. So I like it very much. But of course we all know it's like startups, like the default state of a startup is like dying somewhere in a corner without anybody knowing that. Like that's the default state. So
for everybody who has a startup.
Exactly. So
they know what it is.
Yeah, and they know. I mean, yeah. So and some pop up become really big. I mean, this guy here was Paylogic. Well, started small, right? And
it's
for a million. So I mean, that's I think one of the success stories there. Yeah. And Adyen is one of the other great innovators.
Can I add a question to that?
Yeah.
Would you think that the investing in startups as a model to make money and selling eventually
Horrible.
Works with the blockchain technology spirit, because it's about decentralization, it's about opening up, whereas the traditional VC investment model might work out completely differently.
So is startups a good fit for is the current startup model a good fit for getting blockchain technology and infrastructure off the ground?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll answer the question. But, I'm asking, I'm telling you because, as I said, a company that has a couple of services we built software for these bigger companies, right? For banks, etc. They don't talk to us basically. I can tell. Well, I've had a company that's been successful, sold for I don't know what. They don't even hear you saying it.
Yeah.
They don't even see you standing right. I can build systems. I can build teams. I can build whatever it is. But I'm so small. We're so small as a team.
Yeah.
And again, at my companies, I have 5 companies, and they're like, the reason that I have 5 companies is that I believe in company's law. Company's law says that a company will build systems that is a reflection of their communication structure. So if you have a big centralized organization, it will build a big centralized system.
Yeah.
So we, as these companies, said we want to build Web 11. And Web 11 is a decentralized system. So if we want to build a decentralized system that has decentralized communication, then we need a decentralized company. In other words, we need like companies that are specialized in certain areas, but they work together as a network. So I have 5 small companies, and they have high-class employees and have the best knowledge in the world on all these aspects. I have an IoT company that has really world-class developers in there, and there's none of these big companies that are willing to talk to us. We rang about with cool stuff, with these contracts and with compilers, stuff that works that you can use. You don't see it. No, we go to the big 5. I don't have to ramble the door here in the south. I mean, I'm from Groningen, so I don't take the effort to go here to Amsterdam too much. Yeah. Once I'm here, I ramble on the door and they don't open. These are worlds apart. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to come over here and I have to just prove I have to build something that people love and will use, and then these big companies, oh, that's an innovative small company, let's start with them. But until that point, I mean, there's no reason, I mean, it doesn't fit. They're worlds apart. Really.
Is that forever going to be the case? Because you hear a lot about all these big companies saying, we want to work with startups, and we're going agile and innovative innovation centers and blockchain labs and etc. But so how do you? Lieke, you also mentioned the Netherlands really strong in financial innovation and stuff. So how does that match up? Is there a kind of phase that we need to go through, or is there a missing? What's the missing link between the small startup companies and the big companies? Maybe even are there representatives of big companies in the room who like to hear want to comment?
Well, the connection, I think, it obviously putting those people in the same room at some point, like in events like this. For instance, there's people from EY, there's Deloitte, there's getting the word out and disseminating what's going on in the blockchain space in the Netherlands. Needs to be pushed out.
There's a big. I mean, what you already said is that there's a big DNA difference between the larger companies and the smaller companies. And of course, I mean, some of my who start up in the batch really want to sell to big companies, so they have to do enterprise sales, and they have to work with them, and sometimes sales cycles of more than a year. But I heard this analogy the other day, and I don't know if I completely agree, but it stuck in my mind, which is about the big companies go to the zoo. There are all these caged animals there. The startups, they're wild and ferocious, but they're behind bars. Yeah. And then, so the challenge is taking one of these wild animals home and try to domesticate them as a pet. So, I mean, so that analogy sometimes it doesn't work. And
I heard a related analogy. So like elephants fuck the elephants.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And could it also be a cultural thing? That, for example, people in Holland are more conservative. That the education system was an expectancy that you would become an employee, and preferably of a very large company or seek security with a bank, and it was not considered to be the right thing to do to start working on your own startup, and probably even your parents.
I was a business school.
Could that also be that, for example, compared to other countries, like I'm not talking about Germany, where I think they have the same sort of mentality, but more compared to the Anglo-Saxon countries like the United Kingdom and America, where they maybe have a way more different appreciation entrepreneurs, or maybe a spirit of liberty of entrepreneur and risk taking.
Is the Netherlands less
Risk-taking is a big word.
entrepreneurial than the
No,
Anglo-Saxon countries?
I think it's problematic. I had a discussion with the University of Groningen and Hans Hogeschool that I think there's way too many entrepreneurs. Every student that comes out of the university wants to start a startup, and I say, well, I want people that can have a profession that are that can build systems, right? And want to have
Is it not because of an economic necessity at this moment that a lot of people, young people, maybe not people with hardcore IT skills I'm referring to, but I see a lot of young generations who become, out of sheer desperation, become a ZZP.
Everybody's a
entrepreneur and take
ZZP'er,
a
right?
risk.
Is that a desperate move, or is that good for the ecosystem?
If I may, it probably comes back to the DNA analogy that you made. Talking about blockchain and Bitcoin over the last couple of years has a lot of times meant talking about money and how people think that money works.
Yeah.
And this is a red pill, blue pill conversation. If you've seen The Matrix, it's that moment that somebody then during the conversation starts to realize that, wait a minute, these euros are virtual, they're digital, they're not backed by gold. Their debt is created. Nobody is covering that. We just do it in a spreadsheet. And then all of a sudden you start looking through the systems that you were used to, that built your way of thinking, maybe that shaped the way you thought you were supposed to behave in this world. So yeah, maybe it is a cultural thing. And perhaps Dutch are very obedient, are very traditional. On the other hand, there's only 70 million, so we do connect quicker than a lot of other countries.
I'm also Dutch, half English, but it doesn't matter.
I
You see
would-
the differences.
I would also say that the incentives for a large company are very different from a startup. I just came out of a standard job, so to become a startup entrepreneur myself. And my reason for doing this is not because I hate the other job, because I can do that, but because I like to build something for myself. For startups, that's often the incentives. And lots of startups are very keen on taking the view of, I like to create my own stuff, and if I make money, that's nice. You actually need to teach them making money is also important, because otherwise you die. For a large company, the incentive is we need to stay where we are and then grow. It's not to take too many risks. It's risk management, and risk management in the startup is completely different. So probably that's the first mismatch that you have. And if you want to communicate, you need to acknowledge that and then see where you fit in. At least that would be my assessment of it. And of course, in the Netherlands, on the other hand, the Netherlands are very pragmatic. I love the fact that we had a Ministry of Finance that already in 2012 said, we don't care if it's a currency or a commodity, Bitcoin, as long as you pay taxes. That was exactly, Dijsselbloem said that, and it was printed, and actually I liked it. Okay, we don't care about the discussion, pay the taxes. So this also means a bit about how we think about business, probably in the Netherlands.
Very, very pragmatic. There was some people behind you.
I think one of the basic flaws of Bitcoin and Ethereum is that it doesn't have, like, if you look at the euro in Holland, it has a by law, it's the way to pay taxes. If you don't have euros, you cannot pay taxes, or you have to pay in gold. It's two options. But it has there's a group that has a basic interest in the existence of euros, which is the Dutch state. With Bitcoin and Ethereum, you don't really have that. And my suggestion, I've written about this in the past, is it should be like developers should say, you can only pay me in Bitcoin. And immediately that would mean that Bitcoin would have there would be a market for Bitcoin, because everybody that wants to develop.
Wait, you're telling me there's no market for Bitcoins right now?
Oh, I'm going to sell all my Bitcoin.
But it's not as solid and secure. Bitcoin can just evaporate towards the Ethereum.
It's a volatile market, but it's a market for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that's the basic flaw also with Ethereum. If you want to, Ethereum is a little bit less money from the world.
If we turn it around though, is regulation or the lack of recognition by the government, then let's say, is that really what's holding us back?
I strongly believe that entrepreneurs have to work their way around that. I mean, you have to have the realization that you're on a chessboard, and that there are chess pieces around you. So you have to have that, but you have to hack your way around that. I mean, what Uber did in hacking their way around the whole arcane taxi system, you have to do with these kinds of technologies. I strongly believe that, and I think that's the moral obligations of a lot of entrepreneurs. To say, okay, to not accept this status quo, although it's like written in law, but some way.
And then reverse it, because once you convince a government, for instance, to say, you know what, you can also pay taxes in Bitcoin, and wow, look at what happens. But you have to work towards that.
Well, there's two things I would like to say. One is that Bitcoin is in Europe, you can use Bitcoin without taxes as currency, so it's free. And Ethereum is the same thing, because there was a European Commission decision. The other thing is that I think that the discussion on a startup is very strange, because Uber is a $250 million supported organization making lots of losses. And you have the real.com, it's the same kind of thing. And they're considered startups, but there's also people here that have no money.
They started really small, and I know how. I mean, I have startups in my batch that rent out their room and sleep on the couch to save money.
That's real stuff.
So that's startup life. But they started small, and I think the basic thing is that there is a lot of need to tackle some of the world's largest problems. And I think a technology like Bitcoin and blockchain, but also Internet of Things and also AI can really help in like making stuff way more efficient and opening chances that we have right now. That's what I believe.
Do you think my two observations on the Dutch, being a Canadian living here, and having a Dutch background, my name is Kastelein, but I think personally, two things that I've seen is risk aversion, which is not only common to Holland, but also across Europe. So, I talk to startups in Groningen, like Crowdy News, and they're like dealing with 4 or 5 million, and they're ecstatic, and their competition are getting 150 in the States. So there's that problem about are we going to, of getting that kind of growth capital that you need to become global. I think the second thing is the fear of failure. That's also very European, very different from North American. I'm Canadian. I mean, maybe it's that West Coast kind of, frontier kind of stuff. But failure is like, okay, on to the next. They say fail early, fail fast in Silicon Valley, right? So, and actually, a failure is a badge of honor in Silicon Valley. But it's not really quite the same in Europe. So, those are a couple of the cultural differences on that side. I think that maybe inhibits growth if some of the blockchain startups could be problematic. But then again, do we really need VC money when we got DAO?
Exactly.
So, who's investing?
First, I was waiting for that.
I was waiting to say that too. VC, right? Sorry.
Well, maybe we should be disrupted.
Well, who else is going to fund the social projects that really need to be done?
Oh, definitely.
It's not going to be the VC.
And that comes back to your question, actually. So
cultural thing. Exactly.
No, well, the funding of like is this a traditional way of funding these kind of things that are more distributed, are more like open source than directly commercial. I think the what we see in the States is that money flows a bit easier to those kinds of big risky ventures, and maybe the DAO is a solution for that. I don't know. I mean that's
basic income.
Or basic income. They're doing that, and that's funny. Y Combinator is actually doing that in Oakland, California.
But maybe we're getting
that's another topic.
Some question?
Yeah, pretty much related to the previous question. When you mentioned, we have to solve the largest problems, right? For blockchain, Bitcoin can be one solution to solve the large problem. I'm just wondering, is a startup or a corporate, which both are a commercial attitude, the right way to think about those, trying to solve those problems? I think actually I'm most curious to Bas what your opinion on this matter is, and do we always need a commercial focus, or can we also think more from a society angle? And when I think about it, it's like the Spotify model on blockchain, or some other use cases. Is a startup then still the right way to go?
What I like about blockchain, the blockchain people that I mainly deal with, and these are hackers on the internet, what I love about that, that's actually the reason why I specifically entered Next, is I love the fact that they experiment and have no clue about its worth. I've seen many applications being developed, and like Factum was made, and somebody started hacking on the Next blockchain and said, oh, I've created a similar service, and then forgot about it. So, Factum is, what's its capitalization? 500 million right now, 50 million right now, and he just hacked something similar and then forgot about it, and they don't care. And I do think that if you start stressing only startups, you tend to get a certain kind of people who doesn't see other things anymore, just because many things are developed by people who just think of things. I always like irritation creates innovation is also one of the things that I also like. The person making the paperclip didn't know this would take off, but it's a useful thing. That kind of thinking I do like, and we shouldn't lose it too soon. It will happen at a certain point. Once you get enough capital in a market, you will get an influx of very aggressive people who are go-getters, and aggressive in the most positive sense, really not in a negative sense. But there is also a kind of building crowdfunding platforms that don't necessarily need to take a large cut. That's also one of the things. You can commercialize it, but you can also do it relatively with low fees. It is possible. I do like that. I hope they'll survive, because this is also something you cannot dictate from the outside. This are probably also very European, probably, because you cannot say this is needed and then it will happen. I do hope that there will be enough fringe people just tinkering away with blockchains, or just making a new blockchain. I've just saw a new project that's just crowdfunded.
You have to wrap it up.
I do like this.
I like your way.
Yes, but I hope that it will survive. Yes, I think it's needed.
So you heard a lot of good things. Just one, and then I'll give you a chance for everybody a chance for a short closing statement. So we heard a lot of things about what is good and what is happening with startups and innovation. A lot of things about how the DNA between large companies and startups, and maybe even between startups and like just basically the community innovators is maybe different. So just as a closing statement, each of you get 10 seconds. What is the most important thing that you think that needs to happen, or maybe is already happening in this area? And I'll start with Lieke because he had something to say.
Well, I'll say something different.
Also,
I only have 10 seconds. I'm starting now.
Awesome.
All of you and everybody else you talk about regarding blockchain technology, make sure that you educate yourself. This is an open source system. It has all sorts of forms, but try and understand how it works before you plunge in. That's something everybody can and should do, no matter if you're a minister or a hacker. If you're a client, if you talk to people that are interested, get them as curious so that they are willing to understand how it works, at least on a basic level.
Well, even though you said it wouldn't be, it's still an answer to my question, right? That's something that definitely everybody can do for themselves. So that's a low-hanging fruit even.
I only want to say keep hacking, keep tinkering, and build stuff people love.
You get the last word.
I would like to add to that, keep an eye on the ball, keep an eye on the problem. Don't start with the technology, always start with the problem, the need that you have, and then figure out this is the need that I have. How can I fix this need? How can I fix this problem? And it might take technology, and if it takes technology, it might be blockchain, but it might be critical. Be critical. And have smart people around you that think alongside with you. Is it a real problem for you in your process? And what can solve it? Is IT a solution? Then reach the IT, and then finally start building stuff.
So, innovate, be critical, educate yourself, but definitely keep on hacking. Thank you very much.